Hey guys, Linc here. Okay, first build video is done. It's in the can, as video people like to speak. I've been studying. So this one has been really, it's been challenging because I had all of these ideas and information here about putting groundwork together. I've got to squeeze that down and make it fit the video format. So first one done. It's not bad. Let's tell me what you like about it, especially also tell me what you don't like, and we can fine-tune it into a more refined product in the future. That should work. It's worked with the other ones. I mean, the pacing for the painting and the weathering videos has really come together. I see no reason we can't do that with the groundwork videos as well. One thing, it's in two parts almost. The first half is just nowhere near as good as the second half. My sincere apologies for that. The second half was shot after I'd edited the dirty video, the weathering video for K2SO, so I learned so much from that. But also I learned how to shoot the video better with the high contrast, say white plastic versus the background. So the second half turned out a lot better quality than the first half. Again, my apologies for that. The first half also, I'd suffered with I was making it piecemeal in between other projects because that's how I always work on groundwork. It's something to do just when you have a little bit of downtime and move it along little bit by little bit. What suffered there was the different backgrounds, etc. And when I watched back through the video, the continuity from a videographer standpoint is terrible. So my apologies for that one. Second half though is really good, and that will be the quality I plan to build on in subsequent videos. Especially next we've got the paint video. That one's going to be primo. Okay, that's pretty good so far. I'll just let you get into it. Sorry, it's a bit long too, but I think it runs along pretty well. Let me know what you think. Thanks guys, thanks a bunch. Cheers, bye. Okay guys, here we go on my first ever base construction tutorial walkthrough, and this will require a little bit of fine tuning. These are the preliminary titles I've gone with: materials, construction, fitting and details. And I thought it seemed a logical way to break it down. Let's fine tune it as we go ahead, okay? Now, first of all, we'll kick off with the materials, the base materials that I've used to the physical construction of the actual base itself. First off, we're going to use cork. This is one of my, it's my go-to materials for this. As far as I know, it's the same stuff. So I went with these ones, 6mm. I'd prefer 5mm just to make my calculations more simple, but 6mm is close enough. It's thick enough that we can use it for chunky effects, etc., but also thin enough that we can layer it up as required. Next, I've been hunting around for some time, looking in different places for a reasonable sort of block that we can just use as is. And I stumbled across this. In Japan, these aren't a popular thing. But here in Australia, quite a few places seem to sell these pencil holders. So I picked up one of these. It's in wood, and it seems to be a perfect size for a lot of the mecha type projects that I'm working on. I had a couple of offcuts left from this stuff, so I used them and simply using some carpenter's glue, glued them on top and trimmed them down to make them fit. It was both thrifty, economical, and reusing the Earth's resources. So it felt like a number of ways of win. And I've loosely put that together, and that's going to form the base for the base for what we're going to put together. A couple of really quick tips on the materials. I've gone with natural ones here, both cork and wood, because they don't have any adverse reactions to mineral spirits like foam and plastics can. So just to keep it nice and simple, cork is really good like that. You can use the ammo products on it, for example, and same with the wood base. I've not had any issues with it. Like we could with plastic. So just to keep it nice and simple there. Last thing we want is some kind of reactions to happen on our groundwork, right? Foam is really bad for that. It reacts quite badly if you put lacquer thinner. Basically, any kind of thinners on uncovered, untreated foam will give off toxic fumes and burn. It melts like the aliens' blood in the early Aliens movies. It's really nasty stuff. So you can use it, but you need to treat it. I'll do that in further videos. But for this one, I wanted to keep the product usage nice and simple so we can concentrate on getting something together quickly and make it look cool. Another safe product we know that we can use is our plat plate. I just happen to have some of this Tamiya one, but all of the brands are fine. And what I'll do is to neaten this up and to have it accept paint, I don't want any additional texture from my wood sides to interfere with the model that's displayed above it. So I like to have my base sides quite neutral looking. Maybe 9 out of 10. I just like a semi-gloss, very neutral looking black base, so it's just there to hold up and prop up the model. Now, for good and for bad, I've gone with 1mm plastic here. 1mm, it's a good balance, right? It's reasonably rigid. It's reasonably easy to cut. You know, it's kind of right in the middle there. There's a lot of you guys, you gunpla guys, who do a lot of work with pla plate. We'll know its characteristics, excuse me, better than I do. But I tend to go between 1mm and 0.5mm plate. I find that any thicker than that, it's quite difficult to cut. But it looks awesome. Any thinner than that, I've tried 0.3mm a couple of times, and it's just too flexible. And you know, it's wobbles all around the place and tends to buckle as I'm gluing it together for the sides. And yeah, that's the last thing you want, is kind of ripples down the side of your base. So I'll tend to go between 1mm and 0.5. The reason I tend to be flexible too is it just makes them easier to buy. If you guys notice too, you know, if you decide on 1mm, all they'll have in the shop is 0.5 and vice versa. If I only want 0.5, lo and behold, they've got 1mm. I wanted to put in and show that I'm using a bunch of the, you know, I'm using measurements and doing everything properly here. But I'll be honest, I don't. Because, you know, so much of my life, and I think we could all relate to this, so much of our life is built around being precise and accurate. So sometimes when I'm doing things like this, the Holy Scriber, sometimes when I'm doing this, you know, I like to do it on the fly, but I know it looks bad. And, you know, some people are very, you know, the engineers in my audience, you guys will know it. I know you guys will take very accurate measurements and you do everything precisely. And you're engineer artists. And you guys know, and a couple of you, I've had jokes with you about it. You know, I'm an artist engineer, so I like to pretend I'm doing it correctly, show that I'm using a ruler, but many times I'll just put the block of wood, whatever I'm using, on the plat plate, sketch around it, you know, like a little kid sketching around your hands, and cut it out. And you know, it's close. It is the right size. Now, I was having a good laugh about doing this. I really do this with a cutter a lot of the time, but I wanted to show a very safe way of doing it. Look how much it makes the camera shake. Whoa! You know, you have to put a fair bit of strength into this, especially 1mm, it's pretty thick. I let this one run in full time as much as possible because I thought it would be pretty funny. I remember when I snapped these, I probably didn't cut them deep enough and I was in a bit of a rush. I mean, I didn't make any mistakes per se, but you can look, I'm really fighting with it there. When that happens, if you haven't done it many times, what it means is you need to have, you know, scored it a little bit better. We can probably get some feedback from the other guys. Like I said, I'm not super experienced. Basically, my work with plaban, it's called in Japan, right? With this plastic plate is basically to make sides of things. I don't often have the need or requirement to modify kits with this kind of stuff, right? But as you can see here, look how much time it took me to then come back and fix it up and score it through properly. I really should have just done it a couple more scribes the first time through. That would have saved me more time. So I wanted to show this just so you could you know, have a bit of a benefit from my small amount of fail here. But it's okay. I mean, it's fun. You get to push down hard with something, use a bit of strength. Now I've gone it a couple more times. If this drags on too much further, now there we go. Come on, Linc. Now get a bit of strength into it. Come on, don't be a wimp. And it'll pop. Come on, this will be fun. I hope it is. I'm pretty nervous now. Is it going to work? And wow, come on. Put your back into it. There it goes. I didn't get all of it though, ready? There it is. Now, I wanted to show that one too. Some of you younger blokes, you're watching that, be careful you don't cut yourself with this stuff. You can tell I was really squeezing into that, right? That's why I like 0.5mm. I do have a record of, you know, of breaking things quite a bit, so maybe score it a little bit more, use a cutter as well. But okay, that worked out. There we go. We got to have that really awesome pop moment. You see what I did just now?
I won't make you watch all of the pieces. You can tell I'm basically going to do the same thing, and on the smaller pieces, come on, Linc. Get it back and forth, and come on, pop. Nicely done. Now, doing that a couple of times, you get this. So, next I do a little bit of test fitting. Now, come on, get it in camera. There we go. I like to butt them in. I mean, there's quite a few ways of doing it. Some of you guys, if you've got carpentry experience, you'll probably be way better at it. But what I like to do is, I have them just a little bit oversized. It's so much easier if they're oversized than undersized. Stretching that styrene is pretty difficult. So I oversize them, butt them in, glue it into place, and then file them back. Lastly here, because I've got that step on the front of the base, I'd like that to be covered in a plastic plate as well. So, I could have measured it around, but I kind of I thumbed it all together, got it into place, drew around it, so that I could do a template. I cut it out and then trimmed it back, and it worked pretty well. With this shot, I just wanted to very briefly show you one of the reasons I quite like working with the water-based acrylic PVA carpenter glues. You don't get the kiddie ones, you got to get the proper one from the hardware store. So this one is from Bunnings here, if you're here in Australia, and it's that they thin with water. And I found that to be super useful when working with groundwork things. In fact, you can even use these glues as a kind of paint. It's somewhat similar for coating things that will be attacked by paint later. But we can get to that in the future. It's a bit more of an advanced thing. But you can see here when I needed to seat the parts into position and clean it up, which you don't want too much unsightly glue poking out. I did it with a soft brush and fingers and cleaned it up with water. It's really easy step to do. And we tend to work with quite a few chemicals as modelers. I don't think it's really going to impact our health, but as possible, using water-based stuff does seem to make our lives a little bit easier and more enjoyable. I'm using that glue again here, and I kind of like these Superman S patterns. Right way, Linc, get it right. I've tried a few different things like the hot glue gun, etc., but this stuff is now really my preferred go-to. You see how I move the glue around? I quite like doing this. It was just really fun. You get that nice smooth consistency out. And when you've got it dead on, ready, you slide it into place. And when you've got that full surface area coverage like this, I found that it sets really well and, really bonds onto the side there. This is my preferred way of doing it right now. And letting that glue set up again for about 24 hours or just overnight, I then take a very sharp knife and whittle down the overhangs. Now again, that's a lot easier than adding it back. I whittle it down until it's just a couple of millimeters left over, and then I'll work the rest of that back with sandpaper. But you want to do the bulk of your heavy lifting, the cutting with a knife here. Just be really careful. Try to cut it parallel to your sides so that you don't accidentally take too much off. Now, so 180. Here's a bunch of stuff that I'm still running on stock that I brought back from Tokyo with me. You can see it. Yodobashi camera. 110 yens where I got this stuff. Well, once I'm finished these, I'll just use something local from the hardware store like Bunnings. 180 grit. It's pretty aggressive. And I like to do it wet because it just collects all of the dust, etc. I've shown this in other videos before. I like, there's a bunch of ways you can do it. You can put them on, we call them paddle pop sticks, the ice cream sticks, but I just put it around a file so that I know it's got a flat edge. And that way, if it starts hitting the other surface, the other front face, I know I'm down flush. And again, there's probably better, people who are good at woodwork and things like that probably have better skills. I failed all of those classes. So if you got better ways of doing this, do give me a shout. But I like this one, that the 180 is pretty aggressive. I work it down until it's flush, and then I'll switch out for a softer grade of sandpaper. As shown here, right at the end, I'll go for, say, 400 for final cleanup and to get any of the rougher spots off, and then to smooth it out, say 600 to 800 grit. Also wet, just to see if there's any, any gouges or any of the thicker scratches that are left over from the previous steps. That helps to give it a nice smooth finish. It doesn't have to be super good, most of the eyes should be on the model above it, but we want it to be relatively distraction free. I wanted to call this fitting or mating. I thought it was good enough to set as a standalone part of building the base because it's very important that the base is custom made for the model. There's nothing worse than you can tell the groundwork and the model were made completely, separately and irrespective of one another, and they don't actually match up. You can tell, that model has just been plonked down on the groundwork. So ideally, this is done before you've painted it, because you don't want glues and what have you getting onto your model, but I rarely am foresighted enough to do that. I always end up doing it after the fact, and again, I'm doing that here. There's a couple of ways of doing it, clay, etc. One of the ones I like using myself is two-part epoxy putty. Here I'm using it. The box said quick type, but going by the colors, I believe I must have put some of the smooth type in here. I'll always dip it in water. That helps it to stop sticking to my fingers and the tools. And then this stuff felt a little bit old. I guess it eventually goes off. It was quite stiff, much stiffer than when it's fresh and new. So this was a tip I took from the Hobby Japan guys. I would see them running a lighter under it and ask them, why are you doing that? And it was to help soften up some of these older putties. And they believed it helped with the reaction, the chemical reaction of the what would you call it, the curing, the reaction between these two compounds. And it seems to work for me. But the main thing here is it softens it up and makes it a little bit easier to knead into one consistency. And kneading it really did. That really paid dividends this time, because it took forever to get this stuff into a decent sort of one uniform color. But once it was done, it cured correctly. So I guess we've tested it out, but it's probably 2, 3, maybe even be more years old than that. Anyway, I've got the foot in place there. You can see K2SO's foot. It's in there because I knew I wanted to build up a certain amount of height around the edges and blend in and hide this plastic plate so that it meshed in with the groundwork and looked more natural. Because of the really awful properties of the old epoxy putty, usually when it's new and soft, that first 20 to 30 minutes, it's difficult to work with sometimes because it's so soft. It was not the case with this one. So that's why I'm working with the small sausages, I guess we could call them. But I'm just working it into smaller areas, and I'm fleshing out's not the right way to say it. Bulking out. Thank you, Linc. Bulking out the plastic area to make it into a small mound that then I'm planning to do with subsequent steps, building that up with acrylic layers, like the mud products from Ammo by Mig Jimenez. But this was a little bit tedious. Because of that consistency of the putty. So the reason I'm pointing that out, it's not that I'm just having a bit of an old Linc whine to you. If you're doing this with new, good putty, you don't have to break it up into small little steps like this. This is mostly just because I'm working with really old product, and it was very challenging to use. If you're using a new one, you could probably plonk all of that down in one hit and just move it into shape. Yes, I'm going to buy some new stuff, and I'll show you the difference on the next one, okay? Here's the base and the putty mostly all put together. Now, about this stage, I started realizing that I was doing a terrible job in putting the video wasn't going together as a unified product. So sincere apologies from that. This is about the stage when I was doing the dirty video for K2SO, and I was really starting to nail how to shoot the white on black. So the video footage previous to this has been, you can tell the difference between that and this. It's night and day, isn't it? Here I'm just explaining of, I use those different grits of sandpaper that we've already gone through. I let the putty cure overnight, nice and hardened up, and I used a little bit of leftover putty to fix up any gaps that were left here in assembling the side construction parts of the base. Well, there we have it. That would be fitting done for me, and next I'll move on to details, making the base look like it matches up with our model both visually and textually, and to make sure it tells our narrative. Here I'm showing you some areas where I've tried to use black gloss spray, Tamiya, again on the base, and my skill's just not there. I don't like how it turns out, so I'm going to keep away from that. I needed to sand it back in a bunch of places, didn't work for me. Ammo by Mig mud acrylics. I've been pretty interested to use these. I've used very similar, sealed for your protection. I've used very similar products over the years. They're basically, those heavy acrylic gels that we can get from the artist display store, artist supply store. They don't display artists, do they? Otherwise we'd all be standing in there, wouldn't we? This stuff is, yeah, I'm using my, this is my Humbrol opening mega tool that I use for everything. And just spinning it off the lid there, waste not, want not. Let's see how the thinner stuff dries first, spatulaing it on. You can home make these, and I do. And for some applications, I would recommend that. This one comes heavily textured. That's one of the things you can feel it. It's got that grit in there. I believe it would be a silicon product. You can get, companies say like Golden acrylics. They sell a product called Stucco. I think it is Stucco paste that I've used. This one's very similar. Benefits, however, from using this ammo stuff, that it has color built in, and that's actually more difficult to do than it looks. In the past, I used dry pigment powders. It does work, but the amount you need to put in to color the acrylic gel is a lot, so it ends up being quite expensive actually. And then you can just use other paints as well. Tamiya acrylics work, Vallejo Ammo by MIG acrylics all work. But the volume of paint you need to put in to change the color, it's quite a bit. And you tend to you're thinning the consistency of the gel, which increases the drying time. So I quite like this product that the color was very even. If you're in a hurry and you don't want to repaint it, boom, you can just slather this stuff down, let it dry, run into your model show, slap it on the table, and collect your gold medal. Because you watch my show, of course you're getting gold medals. I don't have any gold medals, it's true. But if that's what you're after, I think this particular texture would also be pretty good for Warhammer minis, because you could do a dry brush, say with bleached bone type color. I know the new one's got a new name, it's Shibanti or something, but you guys know what I mean. It's bleached bone, right? An ivory color, and dry brush it, wax some, what's it called? Agrax Earthshade, and done. It would be very easy to set up. It's stretched pretty well. I did notice, I don't know if I'm preempting myself here, there was minimal shrinkage. If you guys have used basing products before, you'll know one of the banes of doing this is the bloody stuff shrinks. You fit it perfectly on your base, you cover up all of the gaps, you put it aside, come back the next day, and it's shrunk, and making you look like you're noobish with no skills. And no, it's the product. This didn't shrink much, and it stayed actually quite flexible. That was a little bit different. I've used some acrylic heavy gels that they don't dry super rigid, but they're more rigid than this. This was actually quite springy to the touch. I know this is probably a really weird way to describe it, but if you've ever been to those tartan running tracks, I think it's called, that rubbery sort of reddish compound that you'll see it at decent sized venues, it kind of dries like that stuff, which was interesting. See this line here, the demarcation. I'm going to put other details there, so I'm very careful not to fill that up too much. You want the details to stand out there. And I'm leaving a bit of space there around the putty as well, because I wanted a different texture. I've got 3 of these products. I didn't want to crack 3 open. I thought I'll try this one, the dry type one, get into a smoother sort of consistency here, and then try the wet one. Because for sure it will have, in my mind I was thinking, I hadn't opened it yet, but for sure it's going to have a different texture, and that's really what I wanted from this. I'm planning on painting it anyway, so the paint was relatively, what's the way to say that? The paint wasn't as useful for me for this step, but it kind of didn't hurt to visualize it, and for Mos Eisley it's not too far off. I had a bit of trouble. See on these sides here, you can see there's a little bit of an air gap, a slight gap between my chunky plastic work and fitting the side of the base, but I got most of it covered. Now here's what I really liked. I was quite keen to show you guys this one. It really does clean up in water. So I got my brush out to make sure the demarcation line, I wanted it to be relatively low. I didn't want volume to accumulate there, so that I could put different details in there. If you look around, when we're walking around and you look down at the curb, the sidewalk, the gutter, you can see a different amounts of stuff accumulates down there. So I wanted this to butt up against it, but not have too much volume in there. I hope I haven't labored that point too much, but it's those small details. When I look at various artists' work, it's often those small details that break that illusion for me. And we talked about this during the K2SO weathering video. It's that, what is it? The suspension of disbelief that I'm really aiming for here. And the groundwork, I think, does a lot of that heavy lifting for us in putting this model into another world for us and for our viewer. So I'm really going after that. Here it is. It thins down really nicely with water. They have two products. I'm going to test the other one over the top. They've got an enamel based one, which is more, I believe, would be a painting type effect. This one's more of a coverage effect, but you can see there, it thins with water really, really well. Good stuff. Oh, I should mention too, because for some reason I didn't capture a video of it. Can you see the grey texture on top of the cork? That's using that spatula tool that I showed you before. That's, once again, Tamiya Basic Putty. You guys know I love that stuff. That's just, it's spatulaed on and thin and, what would you call it? You know when you're concreting something, you stretch it out with your trowel? I basically troweled it on there, like working on real concrete, and just left a few gaps in it, so that once it's painted and dry brushed, they'll pop out. It was very simple to do. Apologies for not capturing that this time, but that will be a much often used speed technique for me. I will definitely do another, that will feature in another tutorial very soon, I promise. Okay, now whilst it's still wet, I'm going to apply acrylic mud, also from Ammo by Mig. And this one, I was really hoping that it would be a smoother, even, it doesn't really matter that if it dries glossy or not, because we'll paint it, but yes, it has a lot less stuff in it. And listen, word to the wise, if you are short on funds and you only want to get, say, one of these products and use it on all of your bases, get this one. I know it might seem the other one would be more useful to use on lots of different stuff, but actually I believe the darker color is easier to paint up. It's almost already kind of like in a primed color, if you know what I mean. And it's easier to add texture than it is to take it away. So I bought a couple of these textured products, and I found, they're difficult to adjust. This one, I think it's pretty much perfect right out of it to use for mud. Then when you want to add, you could just chuck sand in it or other different textures. Particularly when we're working at these larger scales, it becomes more versatile because you can change the scale of your texture. So this would be the one, this mud one would be the one I would suggest as a first buy if you're going to investigate and invest in these kind of products. I want to save you guys a bunch of money. I want to make the $10 you spent to get this video save money for you. So yeah, boom, I think I just saved you more than $10 there. Because I think they've got 6 versions of this now. You need one maybe, and then we'll paint them, and they just look so much better painted. Whoop, you spilled some there, Linc. Not to worry. You can see the texture. But besides like pitching you guys how to save money, I better tell you what I'm doing. So my idea is that despite Mos Eisly being, mostly dry, etc., I wanted to give K2SO a sense of weight. So not only am I blending in his base there, but I'm also having it so it's pushing the surrounding earth out just a little bit. You got to imagine he's a huge robot, and he doesn't sound like he's made out of lightweight materials in the movies. So a certain, a sense of mass and inertia there in standing in the ground. Again, water-based products. So brush, you can protect your brush a little bit by dipping it in water. Now see here from a top-down perspective. Can you see how the edge of the concrete/stone slab there is almost perpendicular to the mud splash? I noticed that pretty soon and changed it, but from a general rule of art, perspectives and doing groundwork and dioramas, we must keep away from any same angles. So the perpendicularness, or close to being perpendicular to there, is quite bad. I notice it pretty soon. I remember adjusting it, but we want to make sure that all of the angles that we put together in our groundwork don't match up too closely. And we also need to make sure that they don't match up with the sides. Otherwise it tends to look like the object has been framed, if that makes sense. As this moves along, and as we do different versions of it, actually it does look a little bit better from that angle. And I do camouflage it a little bit with some soft additions. Now here we go. The front area here, I wanted to put in a spring type thing. Now there's one of my really good friends. I love his groundwork. I borrowed this idea from him, Alexandre Duchamp. Sorry if I say your name wrong, bro. Alex. He's in our Facebook group. You'll see his work. He is a groundwork master. One of the things I really liked about his work was he puts a spring or this type of thing in it. So this is one of the ones I borrowed, and I quite like the coil. We nicknamed and joke about this one, the coil. The spring and the coil. This one is the same material that I used on the back legs of the Maschinen Krieger suits. It's the inside of a cable from a LAN cable. So Mark, that you see in the credits, Mark B, he pointed these out to me. They're roughly 1mm. They're really, really useful. They're plastic coated and stiff wire inside that keep their shape. Here I've set it into the groundwork to fill that void space, but not too much. It visually fills it. And you'll be able to see with the color work, I'm going to paint that element to match the shoulder of K2SO. And that will instantly, despite the disparity of colors in the groundwork and the model itself, that will instantly bring the model and the groundwork together. Really nifty, right? Here's a quick add-on. I want to put that stuff, that glass, later. I didn't want to set it in now. I had it ready, but I didn't set it in because I don't want to paint it. As I'm cutting up all of the pieces of cork, you get a lot of offcuts, rough bits. I keep them in a little Ziploc, and whilst this stuff is wet, these acrylics, I'm just throwing them in there and breaking a little bit off, get some dust, just to get different textures in there. Until painted, you won't really see them, but I'm setting them in there now, and they will add a great deal of visual detail once we get to painting it. This is dried off. I've allowed it to dry off overnight, and I'm coming back with this Selleys woodworking glue. It's I've seen people lament over the different versions. Some people will say use matte medium, and it's not bad, but it doesn't have strong adhesive properties. And as I'll be painting it anyway, I'll be relying on the matting agents in the paint that I choose to use, such as Tamiya Ammo by MIG. That will matte down the finish just fine. So I use glue that works as glue. I know it sounds really simple, but I see people going to great lengths to avoid products that are made for a particular purpose. I put it onto some waxed paper here. Sorry about the glare on the side there. It's just, between the black and the white, it's hard to pick up. Using my trusty old beat up brush, I water it down. This one, I'd previously used one called Mokoyo Bond. It's a Japanese product. This one I think is actually better. This, if you happen to be in Oz, I don't know if you guys, my friends in America, I don't know if you can get this one there or in UK, but this one available from Bunnings, and it was it's pretty cheap. It thins beautifully, so I thin it down with water, and then I'm going to sprinkle all manner of things. The more the merrier with groundwork. I know that's going to become like a joke later, but seriously, as you start adding more and more different types of textures and products into it, it greatly increases the interest and realism of your groundwork. Here I'm using an interesting product that Ushi van Rosten, Ushi. I'll put a link in so that you can find it if you want, but it's basically, it's railroad stuff. Man, I can't say that quickly. Dollar store stuff. It's all pretty similar, but they put it into this like little handy twist off pack. It's not bad. But I really think, rather than buying the branded product like this, it's good and handy. But I saw one of the guys on recently just bought a bunch of stuff like this from one of those dollar stores. It's called Foliage, that kind of thing. Or you could get it from somewhere that does those railway supply places, right? And it doesn't really matter because we're going to paint it again. I know I keep harping on that. We're just using these for the textures. These ones are little bits of, that seed foam sponge stuff that people use. It looks terrible as is. It really looks horrible. I mean, you have to paint this stuff. I know they try to give it to us in a million different colors, and say that it's useful for different things, but nah, you gotta paint them. I base them all black and then build up colors of them. Again, just getting the texture, and you can see I'm working it into those creases, the places where all of this junk and stuff will accumulate over time on a kind of, I'm looking at this as a city street in Mos Eisley, so you just know that a lot of, pardon my French, a lot of crap just accumulates in places like that. I went down through the pile. This one had 4 or 5 products in this little Tower of Terror deal, and sadly the textures and the grain weren't all that different. They were just a couple of different colors. Anyway, so I've probably got a couple of two different versions in there. The airbrushing this step is good if you've got it set up. I'm working, my little station here is not set up with the airbrush for this step, so thinning it with water, the woodworking glue tends to be okay. You can get a bit of sticking to the brush, it's a bit of a pain. I have in the past put in a drop of dishwashing liquid. I didn't think to do it this time. I wanted to see how simple I could get away with it, but if you're having trouble getting this glue, this acrylic water glue mix to go into all of the deep spots, just a tiny drop of washing, what do you call it, kitchen soap, washing up detergent, washing up liquid, will help break the surface tension and let it go in there. And I'm moving it all back in there. You can see it's because of spooning it out, it'll go a little bit all over the place. Moving it back into position here. You've got plenty of working time. It's fun, and about this stage I'm looking at the groundwork going, hey, I'm really liking this. It's really starting to look nifty. Last but not least, one of the products I really like to put on it is dirt. Yep, for real. It's real dirt to display real dirt. Now be careful. I did microwave this. I keep it in a little tub and I microwave it 30 seconds or so, just to, people say that kills off the bacteria, but and my wife says, what the heck are you doing? There's differences and nuances in real dirt that you just can't get from a lot of synthetic products, and it worked out just fine. There's little rocks in there, there's just little weird stuff in there that lends it such a randomized, brilliant, interesting texture that once it's got the primer in it, you see it, you just go, wow, that looks so legit. In terms of placement, I have been strategic. It looks pretty random, but no, you don't want your ground to be too random. I know that maybe sounds a little bit odd, but no, be strategic. So the concrete block slab that one of his feet will be on is lightly dusted. Then I've gone for a heavier dusting between where his other foot will be and the join, the crack in between the groundwork there, because I want that to be highly textured. It's kind of like a drop shadow in between his legs as well, so I'm going to have it to be a little bit darker there. Some artists will go with light under there. They say they like to put a spotlight under the figure. I think both can work. This is a large scale figure, so I like the idea of a drop shadow. If it was a smaller figure, say 135 or maybe 28mm Warhammer type guy, I think the spotlight works better because they're small. This in real life is quite big. The drop shadow will just help build that again, that suspension of disbelief, help us to believe that it's a real little K2SO standing there. This woodworking glue thinned, I'm giving it a final coat over just to make sure, give it an opportunity to solidify all of these fine details there. Some will blow off when we paint it, that's just part of the course, and some will pick up and end up on the palette there, as you can see as well. And that's it, that's pretty much done. I sprinkle a few more for effect. Why do you do that just after I say I'm done, Linc? Wow. And I thought it was looking a bit sparse. But that's basically it. Then I'll let that dry. Just overnight is fine, say 12 odd hours or so. And then I'll paint it up. I'm pretty sure I've got a shot for you guys. I airbrushed up the sides with that Evo, Gaia Notes Evo product that I've talked about a few times. I just loved that. I don't think I'll be going back to the Tamiya spray can. Tamiya spray can for base coating models is just brilliant, but for some reason I can't get it to work on the flat sides of bases. I think the problem is there. It's my impatience with it. My fault. And here we have it. This is the final stage, I think, to making your base. The construction phase of it is actually priming the product. So I've gone with that, as mentioned, the Evo Granite Surfacer. You can use any surfacer product here, but by airbrush it just went on perfectly. I can't say how much I love this stuff. Mr. Surfacer Black probably works just as well. I really like the amount of sheen that this product leaves. And because this is dried overnight, I just very carefully airbrushed the sides. I was thinking of switching out to acrylic for the top, but I didn't. This went on really well on the top as well. I've got a photo, I'll share that in just a moment. But the other thing too that really worked for me, I airbrushed this stuff outside because I live in an apartment. So having the opportunity to have good weather worked for using this lacquer based product. If you guys are stuck with, you're in cold weather or you have to use an acrylic, the Ammo one-shot primer will work pretty well for this. It doesn't have the same sheen, but you could fix that up by putting some satin coat over it, say like Lucky Varnish or something like that. But this one, oh, look how that goes on. Just watching it back makes me all happy. Yeah, loved it. Okay, I'll dig up a shot, just a moment. Okay, cool, we made it. So here are my base materials, and then adding some detail work, we can get it looking like this. And then once we've primed it up, I've gone with black for a very grim dark, we get this. And I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, it's just the right amount. It may even be a little bit over textured, but you can see once it's painted black, brings it all together. We can see the different, the mud texture at the back there, and it's looking pretty good. I'm really excited to paint this, and I think it'll be a wonderful way to set off K2SO and fix him into his narrative. Okay, back with more soon. Cheers, guys. I get my Star Wars kits, paints, and tools from my local hobby shop, Hobbyco. And let's do our part, support local, and check them out. If you're also in Australia, get your local hobby shop to contact Ryan at Hobbyco and they will get Star Wars in for you. Cool, right? Special extra big thanks to my Paint on Plastic co-producers Ivan, MB, Grant, Con, Jack, Simon, Robert, MC, Kelso, and Kevin. Big shout out to the Paint on Plastic supporter community who helped make all of this stuff happen. I couldn't be doing it without you artists supporting this artist. Thank you very much, guys. Sincerely.